I was the only one without a gift under the tree. But I didn't cry. I reached into my purse, and everything changed. My name is Della Theodore. I'm 72 years old, and I live alone in a small brick house just outside Asheville, North Carolina. It's quiet here, the kind of quiet some people find lonely, but I've come to appreciate it. I get up with the sun, make my coffee just the way I like it, and sit by the window where the light hits the hardwood just right. I do my puzzles in the afternoon, watch the local news at 6, and call it a night by 9. There's comfort in rhythm, especially since my husband, Ed, passed away 7 years ago. We were married 41 years. He had strong hands and a soft laugh, a mechanic by trade, but he knew how to fix more than engines. He knew how to fix people too. Losing him knocked the breath out of me. I thought I'd never find balance again, but little by little, I built something steady. I wasn't thriving, not yet, but I was standing. I hadn't heard from my son Alvin in over a year. Not a real conversation, anyway. A few happy birthdays over text. One photo of the kids on Halloween. That was it. He and his wife Ivy had slowly pulled away over the years. It started after Ed's funeral. Ivy got quiet. Alvin got busier. Visits stopped. Calls dried up. One day I looked up and realized I wasn't part of their life anymore. So when the phone rang on a chilly Tuesday morning in early December, and I saw Ivy's name light up on the screen, my first thought was, wrong number. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Hello. Hi, Della. Ivy said, sounding just a little too cheerful. It's Ivy. I blinked. I know. She laughed lightly, like I had said something funny. I know this is a little sudden, but Alvin and I were talking, and we wanted to invite you to Charleston for Christmas this year. With the kids. Everyone will be here. I looked out the window. The leaves had all fallen from the dogwood tree in my front yard. I hadn't been invited to anything in 4 years, not even to Lacey's high school graduation. Well, I said slowly, that's unexpected. I know, Ivy said quickly. But the kids have been asking about you, and Alvin thought, well, it's time. Time for what? I didn't say that. I just sat there with the phone warm against my ear, and my heart doing something I couldn't quite name. I mean, it's been too long, she added. We'd love to have you. There was a pause. I heard a dog bark in the background. Probably their Labradoodle, Tofu, the one I've never met. I'll think about it. I said, okay, sure, she replied. We'd love to see you. We hung up. I stared at the phone for a long while. Ivy had always been polite on the surface. Too polite. Behind the pleasantries, there was a cold distance I could never quite cross. Alvin didn't fight it. He just faded with her. The last time I saw them all was Christmas Eve, 4 years ago. I baked 3 pies and brought gifts for everyone. I remember Ivy whispering something to Alvin while I talked like I wasn't even in the room. That night, they handed out presents, one by one, and skipped my name entirely. No one even noticed. Not even Alvin. Not even the kids. I left the next morning without saying a word. That was the day I stopped calling. It hurt, but I was tired of forcing myself into places where I clearly wasn't welcome. And now, suddenly, they wanted me back at the table. I stood up from the chair by the window and walked to the kitchen, made another cup of tea, stirred it slowly. I could feel the old ache rising up. The one that asks, why wasn't I enough? But another voice answered this time. A steadier one I hadn't heard in a while. They don't know what I've been doing these last few years. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and texted Ivy back. I'll come. Then I set the cup down, walked to my bedroom, and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a thick envelope sealed, stamped, and waiting. The title read, Q4 Performance Report, Second Wind Collective LLC. They didn't know who I'd become, but they were about to find out. After Ed passed, I tried to hold on to the pieces. Sunday dinners, holidays, birthday parties, I made the effort. I called, I cooked, I offered to babysit when the kids were younger. I showed up with pies, with cards, with things I thought said, I still want to be part of your life. At first, they let me come around, but something in the air had changed. Ivy was never outright rude, but she had a way of making me feel small. If I shared a story, she'd correct a detail or cut me off with a fake laugh. When I brought over food, she'd say things like, "Oh, Della, we're doing more plant-based now," and quietly push my dish aside. The kids would look up from their tablets just long enough to say hi before going back to their screens. Alvin, well, he never said much. He just watched, always trying to keep things smooth. I don't think he meant to hurt me, but his silence did. I still remember one Sunday dinner when Ivy was showing off their new espresso machine. It had lights, knobs, all kinds of settings. She made everyone a cup except me. Then she looked at me and said, "You probably just want tea, right?" I smiled and said, "Sure," but the message was clear. I wasn't included. Not really. Little things like that piled up. I stopped being asked to family outings. When I suggested we go to the beach together, Ivy said the kids had too much going on. When I offered to help Lacey with college prep, she told me they had a counselor for that. Always a reason. Always a way to keep me at a distance. But I loved Alvin. I still do. He was my only child. I remember how he used to fall asleep on my chest as a baby, how he cried the day he left for college. But the man who came back from that campus was quieter around me, more filtered. He'd glance at Ivy before answering my questions, as if waiting for her permission. I noticed, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to push him away. The only one who really stayed in touch was Lacey. She's my oldest granddaughter. Smart, curious, always reading something. She'd text me pictures of her sketches or ask what books I was reading. Nothing long, just enough to remind me I mattered to someone. She once sent me a photo of a bracelet she made in art class. Said it was just for Granny. I still keep it in my nightstand. Then came my 70th birthday. I didn't expect a party or anything fancy, but I did think maybe I'd get a phone call. Maybe a card. Maybe one of the grandkids would FaceTime me. I waited all day. Nothing. Not even a text. I checked the mailbox 3 times. Empty. By 6 p.m., I finally accepted it. They forgot. Or maybe they didn't forget. Maybe they just didn't think it mattered. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and cried harder than I had in years. Not because I needed gifts or a cake, but because I realized something. I was no longer part of their lives. Not really. I was an extra, a background character in their story. That night, something in me shifted. I stopped reaching out. And the strange thing is, in the quiet that followed, I found space to breathe. With all that empty time, I started looking for something, anything, that made me feel like myself again. I wasn't ready to sit around waiting to die. I still had ideas, energy, a little savings. I'd always liked writing. Years ago, I kept a journal. I loved reading magazines and watching interviews with older women who were doing interesting things. I figured, if they can do it, why not me? I started with YouTube tutorials, free ones. I learned how to set up an email list, how to use Canva, how to write blog posts that get traffic. The internet was a little overwhelming at first, but I kept notes in a spiral notebook. Every day, I spent 1 hour learning something new. Then it became 2. I found a course made for older adults trying to start small businesses. It was only $27. I signed up. I watched the videos 3 times, paused, rewound, took notes. It felt good to learn again, like I still had something to offer. Next thing I knew, I had a name for my little blog, Second Wind Stories. I wrote about things I'd lived through: grief, aging, being overlooked, starting over. I shared recipes, too, budget tips, simple ways to feel good when you're alone. I wrote from the heart. I didn't expect much, but women started reading. At first, it was 10 people, then 50, then 500. They left comments like, "You wrote what I feel." One woman said my words made her feel less alone after her husband died. That comment stayed with me. I learned how to sell simple printable journals. Then ebooks. I made one about navigating widowhood, and it sold more than I ever expected. I was shocked the first time. I earned $400 in a week. I didn't tell anyone, not even Lacey. It felt like my secret world, a place where I wasn't invisible, where I mattered. Every time I wanted to call Alvin and tell him, something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was protection. I didn't want this to be judged or taken apart like everything else I tried to share before. So I built it quietly, steadily. I kept at it. And now, years later, that forgotten 70th birthday, it became the best gift I could have gotten. It lit a fire I didn't know I still had. I didn't plan to tell them anything this Christmas. But when I saw that empty space under the tree, something told me it was time. If you've ever shown up for people who never showed up for you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you won't subscribe, then be honest with yourself and tell me in the comments, why do we keep waiting for people who already closed the door? After I stopped waiting on birthday cards and holiday invites, I started thinking differently about what to do with my time. I still miss my husband every day, but I couldn't keep sitting by the window just watching life move past me. I had Ed's life insurance. I didn't spend much of it. Most went into a savings account I barely touched, just in case. I was living off Social Security and a small pension from Ed's shop. My bills were manageable. I cooked simple meals. No fancy trips. Just enough to get by. But after that birthday, my 70th, I decided to use a little of that money to do something for me. Not a cruise, not clothes. I bought a laptop. A new one, not a hand-me-down. I remember standing in the electronics aisle feeling unsure, but I picked a model that had good reviews and a backlit keyboard. I figured if I'm going to learn something new, I need tools that work. That night, I signed up for a free email account, then searched how to start a blog. I ended up down a rabbit hole of YouTube videos and articles that sounded like another language at first: SEO, keywords, landing pages. But I kept watching, kept reading. I wrote down everything in a little blue notebook with a tab that said "Start here." The next day, I found a course called Digital Basics for Beginners 60+. It wasn't flashy, but it was clear. Step-by-step videos with captions I could pause and replay. I took the whole thing in a week. I felt proud, like I'd just climbed a hill no one thought I'd even try. With the confidence from that, I moved on to e-commerce. I learned how to open a shop on Etsy, how to design simple printables, things like grocery lists, prayer journals, memory books. I wasn't artistic, but I had ideas. I found tools that made it easier to bring them to life. Canva was my favorite. Drag and drop. Easy on the eyes. I made templates in the evenings and tested different covers on weekends. Slowly, it came together. That's when I thought of the blog name, Second Wind Stories. It hit me one afternoon while I was sweeping the kitchen. That's what this felt like. A second wind. Not a restart, just a fresh breath after a hard stretch. I bought the domain name and used a cheap website builder to put up my first post. It was called What No One Tells You About Turning 70. It got 12 views, then 20. Then, a few days later, a woman named Nora left a comment. "This is exactly how I feel. Thank you for putting it into words." I stared at that comment like it was gold. Someone was listening. Someone understood. I joined a Facebook group for women over 60 starting online businesses. It was called Wise Women Build. No fake hype. Just real women figuring it out. We shared tips, cheered each other on, asked questions without feeling dumb. That group became my favorite part of the day. One woman posted about Amazon KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. She wrote short guides and journals, published them herself, and earned money every month. I followed her instructions and put together a small ebook called After the Funeral, Finding Yourself Again. It was short, just 42 pages. Honest, real. I priced it at $3.99. I didn't expect much, but it sold. Not hundreds at first, but a few every week. Then someone shared it in a grief group. Suddenly, I was getting emails from women in Kansas, Ohio, even British Columbia. In 3 months, it sold over 2,000 copies. Every week, I learned something new. How to write better descriptions. How to use hashtags. How to build an email list. It wasn't magic. It was work. But it was work I cared about. I set up a small shop connected to my blog. Sold printable journal pages, grief trackers, daily reflections, quiet time guides. I kept my prices fair. I knew the women buying from me weren't made of money. They were like me, just looking for something that felt real. By 71, I launched a paid newsletter. $5 a month. I called it Tea Letters. Every Friday, I sent out a short piece, part story, part encouragement, part advice. I wrote about loneliness, purpose, memory, self-worth. The things no one really talks about once you're older. My first month, 38 women signed up. Then 60. Then 120. One evening, I logged in to check my dashboard and saw a notification. Monthly earnings, $1,104. I just sat there staring at the screen, not because it was a fortune, but because I did that. From scratch. Alone. Quietly. I didn't tell Alvin. I didn't tell Ivy. Not because I wanted to hide, but because I knew they wouldn't see it for what it was. They'd turn it into something small. Or worse, something to critique. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted peace. And I had it. I saved every penny I earned. I reinvested some into better tools, software, a new printer. I upgraded my phone so I could record voice notes when an idea struck me at the store or on a walk. I even had my blog professionally redesigned by a woman in Michigan whose granddaughter helped her start her own business. I had orders coming in daily. I had readers writing me letters. One woman mailed me a scarf she crocheted just to say thank you. Another sent me her mother's cookbook to keep the tradition going. I wasn't just building income. I was building community. And still not a word to my family. When Alvin posted pictures of their new patio set, I liked it, said nothing. When Ivy bragged about the kids' science fair wins, I smiled and scrolled past. I stayed silent. I didn't need them to clap for me. I built something real. And one way or another, this Christmas they were going to see it. The drive from Asheville to Charleston took a little over 6 hours. I packed the car the night before, just one suitcase, my handbag, and a basket of wrapped gifts I'd chosen carefully. Not expensive, but thoughtful. A scented candle Lacey might like, a leather-bound notebook for Alvin, a kitchen set for Ivy that matched the colors I saw in her last Instagram post. It wasn't about the gifts. It was about showing I still cared, even after everything. I wore black slacks, a soft gray sweater, and a warm coat. Simple, clean. My hair was pulled back, my earrings small gold hoops. I looked like myself. When I pulled up to their house, I sat in the car a few minutes before getting out. The place was bigger than I remembered. White brick with those sharp black shutters people love these days. Two shiny SUVs. In the driveway, one of them new, dealer plates still on. I took a breath and rang the bell. Ivy answered. Her smile didn't touch her eyes. Della, she said, drawing out my name. You made it. She leaned in for a quick hug that barely touched me. Her perfume was strong, citrusy. She stepped back to wave me in like I was a guest, not family. Inside, it smelled like pine and cinnamon. Everything was neat. Magazine neat. The tree in the corner looked decorated by a professional, silver and white, not a handmade ornament in sight. Alvin came around the corner holding his phone, thumb still moving on the screen. Hey, Mom, he said, giving me a one-armed hug. Glad you made it. I smiled. Glad to be here. The kids didn't get up. They were on the couch, eyes locked on tablets. I waved. Hi, sweethearts. A murmur of, hey, came back, but their faces never turned. Ivy led me upstairs to the guest room. It was small, colder than I expected. The bedding was old, faded florals, the kind I remembered from their first apartment. The dresser had a fine layer of dust. No lamp, just a ceiling light that flickered when I turned it on. If you need anything, let me know, Ivy said, hand on the door already. Thank you, I replied. I unpacked in silence, lined my shoes neatly under the bed. I placed the gifts in a corner, took out my pajamas, laid them on the pillow. I sat on the edge of the mattress for a moment, staring at the suitcase like it might say something comforting. Later, we gathered in the dining room. Ivy had made something fancy, roast duck with a cherry glaze, quinoa salad with pomegranate seeds. There were name cards on the table. Mine was at the far end, near the serving cart. The conversation moved fast. Ivy talked about her company's holiday numbers, something about conversion rates and ad spend. Alvin jumped in about a new investment app. Lacey asked about Bitcoin. I sipped my tea. No one asked how I'd been. No one asked what I was working on or if I was still writing. Not that I expected them to. This table had always made space for loud voices. I was never one of them. Midway through dinner, Ivy looked over and said, Della, what are you up to these days? Still into those retirement hobbies. The way she said it made the room chuckle. Even Alvin grinned. I looked at my plate, took another sip of tea. Something like that. She nodded, already turning back to the others. I chewed slowly, listened. They still thought I was just idle. I let them think that, because they didn't know. Not yet. If you've ever walked into a room and felt invisible, like just another item on someone's to-do list, hit like and share this video. And if you're not going to subscribe, tell me in the comments. Does being overlooked feel easier to ignore when it happens to someone else? I woke up early, as I always do. The house was still quiet. I could hear the hum of the heater and the occasional creak of floorboards. I got dressed, made the bed, and went downstairs to help with breakfast, but Ivy waved me off. Relax, Stella, she said. We've got it handled. So I sat in the corner armchair, while the smell of cinnamon rolls filled the kitchen. Ivy buzzed around in a matching pajama set, calling out instructions. Alvin was pouring orange juice, still glued to his phone. The kids were already buzzing with excitement, bouncing from room to room, waiting for the green light to tear into the presents under the tree. By 8, everyone gathered in the living room. The fireplace was going, stockings were full, and the Christmas tree sparkled like a magazine cover. There were dozens of gifts underneath, carefully wrapped, color-coordinated, each with a fancy tag and perfect bow. Okay, Ivy called out, clapping her hands. Let's get started. The kids dove in first. Boxes flew open. Wrapping paper covered the floor. Squeals, thank yous, and plastic packaging. Lacey unwrapped a brand new MacBook and hugged her dad. Her younger brother got a gaming headset and a smartwatch. Ivy handed Alvin a sleek golf bag, then opened a large box from him, a designer handbag she'd clearly picked out herself. They smiled for photos, posed in front of the tree. Ivy kissed Alvin's cheek and said, "You did good this year." I sat quietly on the edge of the couch, smiling when someone looked my way, watching. Then Ivy looked around like she'd suddenly noticed something missing. "Wait, did we forget one?" she said, scanning the pile. Alvin cleared his throat and looked down at his coffee. Lacey glanced at me and opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but didn't. "Oh no," Ivy said with a tight little laugh. "I must have forgotten you in all the planning. Della, so much going on. You know how it is." I nodded. "Of course." My grandson chuckled, still holding his new game controller. "Granny's used to it." The room laughed a little. It wasn't mean, not outright, but it cut just the same. I looked around at the piles of gifts, the ribbon scraps, the joy on their faces, and then at the empty space in front of me. No box, no card, not even a stocking. I sipped my tea. Warm, steady. Then I reached into my handbag, slow and calm. "Actually," I said, "I got myself something this year." The room quieted a little. Ivy tilted her head. "I thought I'd share it with you all," I added, pulling out a small envelope. Inside was a printed summary, 4 pages stapled together. Nothing flashy. I laid it gently on the coffee table in front of me and looked up. "You know that little blog I started a while back?" I said, keeping my tone casual. "Well, it's turned into something." No one moved. "It's called Second Wind Stories," I continued. "It has around 85,000 readers now, mostly women over 60. I write about life, aging, loss, things most people don't talk about." I turned the top page. "I also have an Etsy store. Printable journals, ebooks, things like that. I sell around 100 products a week." Alvin blinked. "Wait, seriously?" I nodded. Last quarter, my income was just over $38,000. I let the number sit there for a second. Ivy squinted. Are you saying this is yours?" "Yes," I said. "Built it myself. Learned everything online." Alvin looked at the paper. "You made this much in 3 months." "Sometimes more," I replied. He stared. Lacey looked like she was about to burst with questions, but kept quiet. The younger kids had finally put their gadgets down. Ivy crossed her arms. "And you never told us." "You never asked," I said. The room stayed quiet. No laughter now. No smiles. "I figured I'd get myself something this year," I said, standing up. I pulled out another envelope, this one smaller. I opened it slowly and held up a silver key. "What's that?" Alvin asked. "A key to my new condo," I said. 2-bedroom. Downtown Asheville. I closed last week. Alvin's eyes widened. Ivy's lips parted slightly, but nothing came out. "It's near the farmer's market," I added, "close to the co-op and walking trails. Good natural light." I sat back down. No one said a word. Then I looked around the room again, at the piles of stuff, the noise, the shocked faces, and I smiled just a little. "They still think I'm just idle," I said in my head. "Not anymore." If you've ever sat at a table where love had conditions, go ahead and click subscribe, because people like us need to find each other. And if you're still thinking about it, at least do this. Scroll down and tell me in the comments, what kind of person forgets their mother on Christmas? The room stayed quiet after I held up that key. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come often in a house full of kids and noise. Ivy stood with her arms folded, still as a statue. Alvin looked from the envelope to me like I'd just spoken a language he didn't understand. I reached into my purse again and pulled out the folded packet I'd printed before I left Asheville. 4 pages, stapled. Just facts. No fluff. I placed it gently on the coffee table and pushed it toward them. "What's that?" Alvin asked. "My business dashboard," I said. "A quick summary of the last quarter." He picked it up slowly. Ivy leaned over his shoulder to read. "That blog you once called cute," I said calmly. "It's in syndication now. 2 women's platforms asked to license my weekly pieces. They pay me for content and include my links in every issue." Alvin blinked. "Syndication? Like national?" "Yes. One of them reaches over 200,000 readers a month." He kept flipping the pages. I could see him stopping on the line that showed the Etsy store performance. He squinted, like maybe he misread the numbers. "My Etsy store," I said, "was featured on Silver Years magazine's online gift guide. That brought in a nice bump." Ivy straightened up. "Silver Years? Wait, the lifestyle site?" "Yes," I said. "Their holiday editor emailed me directly." I pointed to the bottom of the second page. "That's the month it happened. Right there. 9,340 orders in December alone. Mostly printable journals. Cost pennies to make. I write them, format them, upload them, and women all over the country buy them." Alvin cleared his throat. "So this is real?" I nodded. "All of it. Last quarter's income, after expenses, was $38,412. Ivy stepped back. She didn't say anything, but the color left her face. Alvin looked up. "Mom, why didn't you say something?" "You never asked," I replied, steady. "Every time I called, it went to voicemail. Every message I sent got a one-word reply. And every holiday, I sat home waiting to be remembered." No one moved. I took a breath and continued. I decided I wasn't going to wait anymore. So I built something. Quietly. On my own time. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it to survive. And then it became something I love. My youngest grandson finally looked up from his gadget. "You're famous?" he asked. I smiled. "Not famous. Just busy." Lacey was still staring at me with a small grin on her face. She hadn't said a word since the conversation started, but her eyes told me she knew, or maybe she always suspected there was more to me than they saw. "Granny," she finally said, "this is amazing." I gave her a warm nod. "Thank you, sweetheart." Alvin ran his hand over his beard. "So this has been going on how long?" "Started learning at 70, turned it into a business within the year." He exhaled through his nose. "And you're making more than I do in some months." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Ivy tried to recover. "Well, maybe we could do a story on your blog and our newsletter. Our company focuses on female-led projects." I looked at her. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm already booked through next quarter. And I've got a few collaborations lined up. One with a women's retreat in Colorado." She blinked. Alvin chuckled nervously. "Wow, this is really something, Mom." I picked up my tea again and took a sip. "It started when you all stopped calling." I said, "That silence gave me time. And that time turned into this." No one laughed this time. No one changed the subject. They just sat with it. Lacey finally leaned forward. "Do you think I could intern with you next summer? I've been looking into digital design and content writing." My heart warmed. "I'd love that." Ivy opened her mouth like she wanted to object, but then closed it again. Alvin rubbed his neck and glanced at the packet one more time. "You've really built something, Mom," he said, softer now. I nodded. "Yes, I have." They didn't say much after that. The rest of the morning passed slower, quieter. The energy had shifted. They'd seen the truth. And once seen, it couldn't be unseen. We finished breakfast without much more conversation. The gifts had all been opened. Wrapping paper was gathered into trash bags. The younger kids had disappeared into their rooms with their new toys. Lacey stayed close, helping clear dishes, her eyes still bouncing between me and the envelope on the coffee table. I sat back down with a fresh cup of tea and watched the steam rise. Alvin and Ivy sat across from me on the couch. The mood was quieter than earlier. I could feel something shifting, but I didn't know what it was yet. Then Ivy spoke, her tone different now, lighter, almost friendly. "You know, Della," she began, "what you've built is really impressive. Truly." I nodded. "Thank you. I mean, building something like this at your age," she went on, "it's rare and inspiring." I raised an eyebrow, but stayed quiet. Alvin leaned forward. "Mom, maybe you could teach Ivy how you did it. She's been looking for something flexible she can do from home, especially now that the kids are older." I took another sip of tea. Let the moment settle. Ivy smiled, the polite kind. "I've been thinking about starting a blog, or maybe a digital product line. We could even build off what you've already created, like a family brand, expand it together." Alvin nodded. "Yeah, we could help scale it. Add new products, bring in more marketing. There's real money in this. With our connections and your base, it could go big." I looked at both of them. Neither of them had looked me in the eye much yesterday. Today, they couldn't stop. I sat my tea down gently and folded my hands in my lap. "No, thank you," I said, clear and calm. Ivy blinked. "Sorry." I said no. "I'm not interested in a partnership." Alvin frowned. "Why not? We're just trying to help." I leaned back in the chair. "Let me explain something." They stayed silent. For years, I called. I showed up. I brought gifts, meals, made room for your schedule. I wanted to be involved. I was treated like an obligation, like someone you had to manage, not someone you wanted around. Alvin looked down at his hands. I continued. "You iced me out. Quietly but intentionally. No more calls. No more invites." Then came that birthday, where nobody even remembered. That was when I decided I had two choices: keep waiting for people who'd moved on without me, or build something of my own. Ivy shifted in her seat. "But that was years ago. Things change." "No," I interrupted, still calm. "I changed, and I did it without help, without support, without anyone asking how I was doing." They didn't argue. And now that it's successful, I said, "You want in, not because you're proud, but because you see potential. That's not family. That's business. And I didn't build this to be handed off like a favor." Alvin rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not like that, Mom." "It is exactly like that," I replied. "If I'd handed you a bag of cookies this morning, none of this would matter to you. But because I handed you numbers, dollar signs, you suddenly see value." No one spoke. "I'm not angry," I added. "Truly, I'm just clear. What I've built is mine. It's personal. It came from the quiet moments you didn't see. It grew out of pain you didn't ask about." Ivy's smile had disappeared completely now. She looked stiff, unsure of where to look. I stood up and reached for my coat draped over the chair. "I'm glad you know now, but it doesn't mean you get a piece of it." Alvin opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. I picked up the key I'd shown them earlier and slipped it back into my purse. "I didn't come here to rub anything in your face. I came because you invited me. I brought gifts, I showed up. And when I wasn't given anything in return, I gave myself what I needed. Peace." The room was still. Lacey stood near the kitchen doorway, watching. Her eyes glistened just a little. "I hope you both find something that gives you what this gave me," I said softly. And with that, I walked out of the room. If someone has ever shown up only when they smelled success on you, hit that like button, because we see you. And if you wouldn't subscribe after hearing this, then maybe ask yourself, Would you be the kind to show up with empty hands and still expect a slice of the pie? Let's talk in the comments. I started packing around 5 that evening. The house was quiet again. The kids were back in their rooms. Ivy had disappeared into the kitchen. Alvin was out back, probably pretending to shovel the patio. I folded my clothes neatly, zipped up my suitcase, and looked around the guest room one last time. The light still flickered. The dresser was still dusty, same as it was when I arrived. Lacey knocked lightly before stepping in. "Need help?" she asked. I smiled. "I've got it, but thank you." She walked over and picked up the basket of leftover gifts. "You really going back tonight?" "I am," I said. "I've got a little something to finish before the day's over." She nodded slowly, then leaned in and hugged me. Not the quick kind. A real hug. Warm. "Still, you've always been the coolest one in this house," she whispered, "even when they acted like you weren't." My eyes softened. I held her a moment longer, then pulled back and reached into my coat pocket. I slid a small envelope into her hand. "What's this?" "Gift card," I said. "Your favorite bookstore. Use it on something that isn't required reading." She grinned. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She tucked it into her hoodie. "Thanks, Granny." We carried my things downstairs. Ivy stood by the front door, holding a dish towel, looking half surprised. "You're really leaving today?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes. I've got my own tradition back home, now. My readers expect my Christmas post. I've never missed one." Alvin came in from the back, just in time to hear that. He didn't say much, just gave me a stiff nod. I looked at both of them. "Thank you for having me." Ivy opened her mouth, maybe to say something else, but I didn't wait for it. I hugged Lacey one more time, rolled my suitcase out to the car, and loaded it myself. The air was crisp, cool on my cheeks. I started the engine, turned on the seat warmer, and pulled away from the curb without looking back. About 20 minutes into the drive, my phone buzzed. Then again, and again. Messages started rolling in. Alvin, Ivy, even one from Lacey. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I put on a soft jazz playlist, let the road stretch in front of me, and let my thoughts drift. The sun had dipped low by then, painting the sky in a pale orange. I drove in silence for a long while. No tension in my chest. No weight in my hands. Just peace. When I got home, I took a warm shower, changed into my robe, and made a cup of chamomile tea. Then I sat at my desk, turned on my little desk lamp, and opened my laptop. I logged into my blog editor, scrolled to the draft I'd written a few days earlier, and added the final paragraph. The title was "The Gift I Gave Myself." I hit publish. Within minutes, comments started coming in. "Thank you for this. I needed it today. This made me cry in the best way. I felt like you were telling my story." They kept coming. Dozens. Then hundreds. I closed the laptop gently, lit a small candle on the table, and sat in the quiet glow of my living room. I thought of all the versions of myself that had waited for someone to notice. She wasn't waiting anymore. 3 months passed like pages turning in a book I actually wanted to read. The trees in Asheville began to bud again, and the sun stayed out longer in the evenings. My days found their rhythm. Early mornings, quiet work, walks through the neighborhood, and hours spent answering messages from women across the country. The post I'd written on Christmas Eve had taken on a life of its own, shared thousands of times, quoted in newsletters I didn't even subscribe to. One morning, I got an email from a producer at a podcast I listened to called The Second Start. They highlighted stories of people over 50 starting new businesses or creative projects. She asked if I'd be willing to come on and talk about second win stories and how I got started. I said yes. The host called me from a studio in Boston. We talked for nearly an hour. She asked thoughtful questions about what it felt like to be forgotten, how I found purpose again, what advice I'd give to other women starting late. I told her the truth. You don't need permission to begin, I said. You just need space, and maybe a little stubbornness. After the episode aired, my inbox flooded, not with praise, but with connection. Real women telling me their hearts, their regrets, their ideas. I replied to every single one. A few weeks later, Lacey came to visit during spring break. She arrived with a duffel bag, a laptop, and a big smile. Said she wanted to learn how I built the newsletter, how I organized the product launches, how I managed customer support. She wasn't there to play pretend. She was serious. We worked side by side at my kitchen table, drinking tea and building her first mini journal. I showed her how to use Canva, how to schedule emails, how to track engagement. She caught on quick. She always did. You really built all this? She asked one afternoon, scrolling through the dashboard. Yes, I said, looking up from my planner. One post at a time. She looked proud and maybe a little inspired. That gave me an idea. I started a mentoring circle. Free. Just a small group at first, 6 women from different towns, all over 65, all interested in learning how to use the internet to create something. We met weekly on Zoom. We laughed, we struggled through the tech bugs, we celebrated every milestone. One of them launched a poetry blog. Another started an online baking club. One woman just wanted to finally learn how to send a group email. And she did. It wasn't about going viral. It was about taking back space. For ourselves. For the parts of us that had gone quiet. Some people spend years waiting for someone else to make room for them. I decided to build my own room and leave the door wide open. One Saturday morning, I sat at my desk with my planner open, sunlight pouring in through the window. The same window I used to stare out of, wondering if anyone would remember me. I took a breath and wrote at the top of the page, Q2 goals, launch mentorship guide, finish spring journal series, plan subscriber retreat in Asheville. I smiled. A real one. They tried to count me out, I thought. Now they subscribed to me. This journey wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about becoming who I knew I already was before they forgot to see me. And now, I want to ask you something. I built something out of silence. I turned loneliness into legacy. If that moved you even a little, hit subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember who they are. And if you watched all the way through and still won't subscribe, then tell me why. Honestly, comments are open. I'll be reading.